Hi everyone, I am here with a hospice story of Lois. This one is told by the hospice nurse, Dottie Dorian, and it is the hospice story of Lois. She never wavered in her commitment to what is of God. First impressions are often lasting impressions, and so it was with Lois. At a study group looking into problem issues related to our city, I sat across the conference table from a regal lady in her mid-60s with fluffy white hair, a legal pad and pen at hand. When the discussion began, it was obvious that was going to be another one of those conversations in the deep South of the 1970s that were taken over by the good old boys. This was how our study group began, but not for long. This feisty lady just kept presenting facts. She had done her homework, and she silenced all of us with her knowledge, retorts, and persistence in making her case. Even at first meeting, I knew she would not take no for an answer. She would persevere if she knew the cause was right and good. She was a lawyer, was married to a classmate lawyer and judge, had raised 5 children, and had become one of the first female attorneys in the state of Florida. I knew I had indeed found a very rare bird and an extraordinary friend. In the late 70s, hospice was just beginning to emerge nationally. In our city, a group of interested people gathered at a church to hear about the hospice concept of care, which was to keep dying patients in their home with a support team of volunteers, both lay and professional. Our hospice adventures were the beginning of long and lasting friendships between Lois and me, and several others sharing the same goal, which we called the Group of 6. As we worked together from meager beginnings with a chair and desk under the stairs for an office and one patient in her own home, the concept began to develop and grow. Lois, in her hospice and other community projects, reflected that she lived the words of Jesus. "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." Luke 10:27. She found unfairness in a restrictive hospice law that required hospices to own a hospital bed in one location far from the patient's own family and doctor. That law put all grassroots programs in violation, and the heart of hospice, which was home care, would become hospital-based if the law had its way. Lois would never compromise her strong belief that she was to use her God-given gifts and talents to do what was just and fair for everyone. So she, together with 2 others, became lobbyists at the state capitol with the goal of changing the hospice law. If she had her way, patients could remain at home, keeping their own doctor, and would not have to go to the hospital far from home rather than one near them if they need should arise. Lois had a mind like a fine steel trap, and her brilliant legal brain could decipher the mumbo-jumbo of not only the law but politics as well. Eventually, corrections and law were made without a dissenting vote, in large part due to Lois and her unfailing faith that God's will would be accomplished and that the patient always came first, no matter what. My friendship with Lois continued as our group of 6 volunteered our time, energy, and resources to move the hospice concept of care Forward well into the 80s and mid-90s. This friendship continued for decades, and our discussions were often heated and humorous, but never dull. I came to believe that the greater the challenge, the stronger Lois' faith became. No matter how difficult the road, Lois never wavered in her commitment to what is of God. Before every meal we shared, we said grace, which was often a long and intimate way of asking for God's blessing on our work and our families, for help with the needs at hand, and for peace in our world. It was a wonderfully loving group that had God as its leader from the start. As the years passed, we entered the new millennium, with our group of 6 becoming a group of 5, then a group of 4. About this time, Lois began to have many new medical problems, becoming frailer with each hospital admission and discharge. We continued to meet regularly at her lovely home, as we always had, but her decline was more apparent with each visit. Lunch went from her elaborate home-cooked feasts that she had always delighted in preparing to a lighter fare of finger sandwiches or takeout. She often smiled and said to us, "I'm not feeling too well today. I think I need a new body." Times were different now, and she relied on God and those He put around her to make this time as good as it could possibly be for her. Some days, with the help of her children, Lois would get out of bed to lunch with us. We knew when she did not get her hair done on Friday to attend church on Sunday that she was really feeling bad. Her supportive family, most of them nearby, checked on her each day, and one daughter in London called frequently. Her pills were laid out for her with loving care, and she could still enjoy looking out at the beautiful St. John's River from every room in her home. As Lois declined, she developed increased pain, weakness, and loss of appetite. Her disease had spread to the abdominal area. It's usually very painful. And she reluctantly agreed to leave her beautiful home to be admitted into the hospice center for caring that she had made possible through her hard, God-directed work so many years earlier. She was now reaping what she herself had sown, dying peacefully with her friends and family around her and the doctor of her own choosing. Only now was not just one patient being well cared for, but over 1,000 patients receiving care every day in the way they wished to receive it. Everything comes full circle. You receive in one way or another by God's own design all that you have given to others. God cannot be outdone in generosity, ever. Lois had a beautiful, large, sunny room, and during her first few weeks there, family and friends came and went all day long. Everyone who visited could not help but notice the shelves of trophies, awards, plaques, every example of honors paying tribute to her lifetime of service to those in need that her family had placed around the room. The steady stream of visitors came from all walks of life because Lois had reached out to people regardless of race, creed, or color. She touched everyone she met and changed lives for the better in every area of the community she served. The old gang still came by, but now we just had a Coke and chocolates, which were graciously offered by the lady in charge. It was interesting that when family members were present, she often slept, but when the old gang appeared, she became her old self and continued her jokes, puns, arguments, and reminiscing. As Lois became weaker and less responsive, she discussed with me concerns that had to be resolved before she could go on in peace. She had a beloved grandchild who had gotten into trouble at college. He had scheduled to be home soon, but as a hospice nurse, I thought perhaps not soon enough. She needed to see this grandchild one last time, but time was running out. It was in God's hands now. Many of God's gifts began to unfold as Lois rested securely in his arms. One morning, a harpist came by and played at her bedside. Lois's son Bill was holding her hand on one side of the bed, while I held her hand on the other side. Many family members were scattered around the room. We were instructed to be quiet while the harpist played the hymns and classical music Lois loved so much. Her son had tears running down his cheeks, as we all did, while trying not to move or wipe our noses. We were perfectly still and were lifted by the very real presence of the Holy Spirit in her room. Lois, who had been asleep, responded when Bill asked her how she liked it. She said in a weak little voice, "It was just beautiful." We were definitely running out of time, and Lois was sleeping more and talking less. Her daughter from London was to arrive shortly, but our prayers that Lois would stay until her grandchild came home was growing only remotely possible. When Lois celebrated her 90th birthday, each family member contributed a special square to a quilt, which the family presented to her. That'd be so nice. This included children, grandchildren, and a great-granddaughter. The quilt hung high on the wall of her living room for all visitors to see. It had wonderful messages made from college banners, personal clothing, photos, stories, trips, and on and on. That'd be so nice. Her daughter from Boston, who had been present for several weeks, decided that Mom had to have her family quilt surrounding her. She climbed up the ladder, retrieved the quilt, and brought it to the hospice center. On what was to be her final day, as Lois was sleeping peacefully, her grandson arrived and went to his grandmother's bedside. Letting her know he was there, she opened her eyes and squeezed his hand. As he laid his face next to hers, God had answered her prayers one more time, letting her know that this much-loved grandson was safe in his hands. As all the family gathered at the bedside, Lois lay wrapped in her family quilt of many colors and went quietly to her heavenly reward, knowing that she had truly completed the work God had given her to do. God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven is indeed a reality. Good night, guys.